the worst thing I can do is stop my own progress. And it's so easy to do that.
Hello and welcome to my podcast, Show Up. My name is Daryl Dittmer. As someone who built financial freedom from scratch, I understand what's possible, as there was a time when I thought I had only a life of mediocrity ahead of me. Drinking, drugs, and zero confidence plagued me. The one thing that changed my life is when I decided to do things differently and give success a chance. And I don't just mean financial success, I mean life success. I started to show up to my life and my career, and one step after another provided me the life I never thought possible. At any age, life begins to change when you start to show up. Welcome to my podcast.
Today I'm joined by Andrew Jobling. Andrew is the author of 8 published books, a coach, and a mentor. He played professional football for the St. Kilda Football Club for 7 years, has spent over 30 years in education, speaking, business development, leadership training elite athletes, and well-being. Andrew is also a dynamic, entertaining, and inspirational speaker who is passionate about helping people believe more, do more, experience more, and succeed more. Welcome, Andrew. Great to have you,
Thanks,
man.
Daryl. Thanks, mate. Great to be here. Well, that's an
Yeah.
impressive introduction. I like the sound of this guy. Hopefully he's got something valuable to say.
I'm sure he does. Yeah, it is impressive. I mean, that's a really cool, journey that you've had thus far. And I know, I read Tears of Joy, loved it. And, your books are doing well out there. I think it's great.
Thank you. Yes, it is a journey, mate. It's a fun journey. And I think we were saying before we started recording, like that's life, isn't it? You go along life and you do the best you can, and then you pick up wisdom along the way that you feel like you can help others with. So I guess that's why we're here, mate, because we've probably made more mistakes than most. We've got more things to talk about, hey? More poor choices.
Right, exactly. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I actually was speaking with someone earlier today on a podcast, and one of the things we talked about was what a blessing it is to have a life that was tumultuous and at times disastrous and difficult and everything else, because it allows us the opportunity to rebound and be, maybe better than we would have been without those kinds of troubles.
Yeah. Look, it's all perspective, Daryl, isn't it? I think, too many people in life look at things that aren't as they want as bad, or, why is this happening to me? And I think I was there too for a lot of my life. And why is this happening? Why have I lost money? Why have I sacked? Why am I divorced? Why me? And then when you start actually asking the question, how is this happening for me? Then things change. And it's just perspective, really. And it's just learning that life is life and there's no straight line and it's not an easy ride, and you're going to get challenged and there's going to be adversity and there's going to be crap that happens. And, the old worn out saying is it doesn't matter what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you that determines how you live your life. And it's just looking at everything, as you said, like celebrating adversity. Yeah, you're challenged. Great. What's going to come out of this? What content as an author? My saying is there's nothing bad in life. It's all just content. It's content for my next book. So you're looking at, oh, that wasn't great. Well, yeah, no, that's good. There's a lesson there. I'll put it in a book and someone else can benefit from it. So that's life, mate. And I think you've got to love it. You've got to love every element of it. You can't just wait for the good times and be happy, and then when it's not good, be miserable, because that's a horrible way to live. If you can just celebrate everything that goes on in life, every human in your life, everything that happens in your life, whether it's good, celebrate it, whether it's bad, celebrate it. Because even if it's bad or seemingly bad, and it's often we judge too soon whether it's bad or not, don't we? We look at something and go, oh, that's bad. But is it bad really? Because what could it turn into? Or what could it help you do? Or what door of opportunity could it open? And I think we judge things way too soon. And I've learned now that, I can't judge this situation that I'm in right now because it's not over yet. And the ripple of it has not played out. So let's just suspend this frustration, suspend this anger, suspend this irritation, and let's just see what evolves, because I guarantee, and these days I know for a fact I'll be celebrating it at some point.
100%. Yeah. And that's so true, because I look back at my life and I'm like, all the crazy stuff that happened and everything that I got myself into, I look back and either it's, wow, I really learned a lot, or, oh man, that wasn't that bad, and and when people ask me why, and they say, well, why did this happen? Why did that happen? I say, there's a 2-word answer to that. And the answer is, why not? It's just stuff that happens. And the only question that matters at that point is, what am I going to do from here?
Yep, that's it. What am I going to do with this? How do I negotiate this, navigate this? What do I learn from this? How do I use this? How do I teach from this? How do I change from this? Everything's positive, mate. There's no bad thing in life. When you look at life that way, you get, okay, nothing bad, really. I mean, there's some challenges for sure. There's some adversity, no doubt. But with perspective, everything can help you in all areas and help other people.
For sure. It's funny because I walk around with my phone and I am constantly on my little notes app putting notes in for my next book, or for a talk, or for coaching, or for something that I'm doing, because life rings my bell constantly, right? Like, hey dude, check this out, or, oh, look, that happened, or wow, isn't that something that would be cool to write about or teach about or whatever? And life is full of that stuff, especially for it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So one of the questions that I love to ask, and the audience, my audience, just, I know they get a lot out of the different answers that come through and the different stories. So because it's so important to relate to what other people have experienced in terms of the obstacles, if we could call them that, or the difficulties or the hurdles or whatever. But most important is, how did we get through them, and how did we show up to make our lives different? So the question is this: tell me about an event or a time in your life that caused you to show up for your life in a different way.
Well, basically, Daryl, that describes my life. Multiple times when adversity strikes, or you hit a roadblock, or there is an event or something happens. I mean, that's just not a one-off thing. That's an ongoing thing. That's an everyday thing, really. I mean, if you think about it, it's an everyday thing. And I think it comes back to, I guess, what you want for your life. And I made a decision, and I'll talk about one particular situation where I actually stopped thinking about what I wanted to do in life and started thinking about how I actually wanted to live. And that was the biggest shift that happened in a time in my life where it was deep and dark. And so, I think we look at when things happen, I think that's the perfect time to just stop and go, okay, so what is my role in this? And sometimes things happen and it's out of our control, for sure. But I would have to say the vast majority of things that happen in our life that are undesirable, and people aren't going to like to hear this, it's our fault, your fault, my fault, that the relationship imploded, that the health crisis happened, that the money was lost, that business crumbled, that whatever divorce happened. As I look at all these events in my life, I think, well, there's one common theme, and that's me. And I think if we don't evolve and change, then we're destined to repeat that and continue getting the same outcomes. So, having said all that, my life has been led by a belief about myself that I'm not good enough. That's really the bottom line. I've been driven by a belief that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and so I've spent my life trying to prove that I am good enough. And in all the wrong, well, not all the wrong ways. I mean, I became a professional athlete in a desire to try and get validated or feel successful or feel like I am good enough. I got into business. I worked my brains out in business to prove to the world that I am worthwhile and valuable and all that kind of rubbish that we do. And this headlong pursuit of business success led me to businesses and led me working 7 days a week. I owned a personal training business. I owned a cafe. The cafe failed miserably. I spiraled into about $100,000 debt. And so I was sitting there. This is probably 25 years ago now, I would say, as you and I are chatting. And I remember the day very, very clearly. It was a dark, dark day as I sat there feeling very helpless and very lost. And, whilst there were people all around me, I felt very alone and just started to mourn a life. Like, here I am, I'm getting towards 40 years old. You should have it all together at that stage in life, right? You should have your shit together at 40. That was my belief. And my life was far from together. In fact, my life couldn't have been much more crap. That's the scientific word for it. It was crap. Debt, working 7 days a week. I really didn't know the answer. I didn't know how to get out of it. All I was doing was what I thought I need to do, and that's work. And if anyone's ever heard the thing, just work and you'll get successful, that's not the whole truth. So as I'm sitting there, and the common question that we ask ourselves is, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? What do I do? And I resisted that question because I thought about it. I thought, well, that's a question that's got me here. I thought I wanted to be a personal trainer, and I realized, well, actually, I guess I did for a while, but no, I don't want to do that. And I thought I wanted to own a cafe, and I definitely didn't want to do that. So here's all these things I thought I wanted to do, and I'd done them, and I thought, no, I don't want to do them. So that question is a dangerous question. I'm not going to ask that question again. So the question I asked myself, because as I'm sitting there in this life that I was not enjoying, I thought, Andrew, how do you want to live? And that was the game changer. That was the thing that changed everything for me, that question. Because as I asked the question, how do I want to live, it sort of removed the need for me to be specifically doing anything in particular. And it just helped me create a vision of a life. A life where I felt good about myself, a life where I was impacting lives, a life where I was healthy and happy and joyful, a life where I was making money from multiple streams, a life where I would wake up in the morning and actually be excited about a day, not dread it. And I wonder how many people listening to this wake up in the morning and their first thought is, oh, no, I don't want to get out of bed, or I don't want to go to work, or I don't want to do that. And I thought, I don't want to live that way anymore. That's miserable. That's a miserable existence. So I started visualizing this life. And my eyes were closed, and I'm in this fantasy world as far away from my reality as I could get. And out of nowhere, and this is the key lesson here is when you ask the right questions, you will get the right answer. And see, most of us ask the wrong questions. People go, what is wrong with me? Well, you ask the question, what is wrong with me? You'll answer it. And you'll get a list of all the reasons why, all the things that are wrong with you, or why can't I do it? Well, you'll find out why. How do I want to live? And I visualized how I want to live. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes this idea to write a book. And, that was the most illogical idea ever. It was such a crazy idea. At that moment in my life, I'm working 7 days, working over 100 hours. I've got no time, no skills. I've got no background, no qualifications, no idea. I was a footballer. I played sport, and I joke that footballers don't write, they grunt. And so here I am just with this crazy illogical idea. I'm going to write a book. Somehow that idea was linked to that vision, right? Now I'm a Christian, so I believe God planted that idea in my head because he knew that was the answer. Now, I didn't know it was the answer, but I thought, well, can I? I don't know. Is there anything that could prove to me that I can't do it? Well, no, there's not that either. So therefore, there's a chance I can be a best-selling author. All right, let's do that. And that was the thinking behind it. And off I went, started writing a book. And that was the start of the change in my life. That my life turned 180 degrees from that moment, because in that moment, I was a best-selling author. In that moment, without any idea what I was doing, I was going to be out of debt and retired from personal training in the next few years. I knew it. I just knew it in my heart. Something just drove me. And over the next couple of years, I wrote and published my first book. I wrote a second book. The two books sold over 100,000 copies in the first couple of years, and my life changed. And that was first book published 2004. So we're 2026 as we're recording this. So it's 22 years ago. And a couple of years after that, I retired. I was out of debt, retired from personal training, and since then, since 2006, I've been full time for 20 years. full-time, author, speaker, mentor, coach, podcaster, and doing all the cool stuff that you and I are doing, Daryl. So that time that looked like a piece of crap, $100,000 debt, depressed, anxious, working 7 days a week, couldn't get much worse, really. Well, with perspective, I could not be more grateful for any moment in my life than that moment, because I do not believe, if I hadn't been in that position, I would never have made that. Well, I had to ask myself that question, and I never would have had the idea to write a book. So it had to be there for this part of my life to evolve. So there's nothing bad about that. I mean, that $100,000 debt, people go, oh, you lost $100,000. No, I didn't. That was a very small investment for the life I live today.
That's great. Yeah, and I love to hear those stories, Andrew, and your story, because it's so easy to blame, number one, and to say, oh, I'm this way because of this, or my life is this way because of that, or and live in the problem as opposed to living in the solution. And it's from what I glean, as soon as you started living in the solution showed up.
Totally.
Right? And had you been living in that problem and continued that problem, then the problem would have continued and exacerbated and probably gotten worse. And there's a huge difference between living in problems and living in solutions.
Totally. So we get what we focus on, don't we? The more we think about it, the more we will attract it into our lives. So get out of the problem and look at the solution, because there's an awesome solution, even one you don't believe or never really have thought of before. You just ask yourself the right question. Such a key thing.
And that question, and how do I want to live? And I kind of equate that to who do I want to be?
Yes.
And how do I want to show up on this planet? Do I want to be a person with that little belief system that I was given when I was a kid, and sort of carry that little box of stuff around with me my whole life and live in that little box? Or do I want to expand, right? And do I want to grow and change and morph and not have the limits?
Yeah, no, I think that was a different stage for me. That next question, I don't think I was ready for that question at that point. How do I want to live and how do I want to show up? I think there's different level, there's different depth to those questions. How do I want to live is a bit more materialistic. It's a little bit more, I don't know. I think it's a little bit more, not superficial is not the right word. It is a little bit. How do I want to live? I want to have money, and I want to have time, and I want to do stuff that I love, right? It's a little bit, what do I want to have rather than who do I want to be? And I think that came later. That came a fair bit later when, I've challenged with marriages and divorces, and after my last marriage ended, I was, in terms of self-worth, I was rock bottom. And that was at that point that I knew I had to think about who do I want to be, because I don't like this person that I am now. And so I think you've got to be careful that you don't jump into all the questions too soon, because it can get overwhelming. Because how do I want to show up? Who do I want to become? That can be overwhelming for a lot of people. I think you've got to be ready to ask the question. I think a simpler question to start with is, how do I want to live? Because you can see that. Right? Like I can see it. If you ask yourself that question, that's a very visual question. How do I want to live? You can see it. I want to travel. I want to spend time with my family. I want to You can look, you can close your eyes and see it. How do I want to show up? That's a little bit more ethereal. And so I think you've got to be ready. You've got to go through the process to get to the point. Well, and again, people listening, I'm not discouraging you from asking the question, how do I want to show up? But I think for me, it was a two-step process for me to be who I am today and the person I love today and the identity that I have today as opposed to who it was then. Even when I started writing the book, it was still a bit superficial because I was still looking for validation. I wanted to have an impact on lives, but a lot of it was, what can I get out of it? And I needed to make money. I was in debt. Let's be honest. part of the reason I did it was to generate another income or multiple sources of income to get me out of debt. So it was a bit more superficial, and the depth came a bit later in my life. And my spiritual journey had begun, and that was a big part. And I think when you get into that stage of life, that's when it's exciting. I really believe that's the cool part.
Absolutely. Now, when I was young and I was starting on the journey of transforming my life, all I wanted to do was have a smile on my face at some point. I was miserable. I was just out of drug and alcohol treatment. And, did I want to do some things with my life? Absolutely. I wanted to do some things with my life. And all of them I've done. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But you're right. I had to start off with, I didn't even know the questions to ask at that point.
No.
And I was 19 years old. So the only thing I would say is all I wanted to do is just have some time where I felt good.
Yeah. Yeah, mate, 19, what do you know? You're a 19-year-old bloke. You know nothing. You're the most clueless human on the planet when you're 19. I know myself because I was a clueless 19-year-old as well. And you just think the world revolves around you, and you think you know everything anyway, even though your life's in the toilet. I still know the answer, right?
Yeah.
You're certainly not ready for that. How do you want to show up? Because it's like, well, check me out. Look at me anyway. I mean, I had biceps and I was a footballer, and I'm showing up. Girls are calling me and this and that. And that's what I thought. That's how I wanted to show up. Well, I couldn't be further from the truth looking back at it now. But at that stage, you don't know. And this is where you've got to be where you've got to be. You've got to be where you're at, and you've got to look at where you're at and just ask. So there might be 19-year-old listening to this. There might be 119-year-old listening to this. I don't think it matters. I think what you do is you've got to say, okay, let's reflect where I am right now. Am I happy with this part of my life? Am I living with joy? Am I having an impact? Am I doing the things that fill me? And do I wake up in the morning? This is the most important question I challenge everyone to ask. Do I wake up in the morning and say, yes, I cannot wait for a new day? Or do I wake up and go, oh my gosh, I just want to hit snooze and go back to sleep? Because that's the challenge. You've got to change something. You cannot, well, I say you cannot. People keep living that way for much of their lives, and they're miserable and they're unhealthy and they're unhappy and they're broke and they're alone because they're forcing themselves to do something that is not aligned necessarily with who they are or their values or whatever it is. You don't have to keep doing this whole have to go to my job. I've got nothing, I've got no choice. I have to go to my job, even if it's miserable. Well, no, actually, you don't have to go. You don't have to. You go because you want the money. You choose to go. If you stayed in bed, no one's going to come and pull you out of bed. Maybe you didn't turn up. They're not going to come after you and knock on the door. So you don't have to do anything. And that little paradigm shift there means that, okay, I choose to go. Okay, well, if I choose to go, how do I choose to show up? How do I choose to look at my job? Or how do I choose another job? Or how do I choose maybe to go into business for myself? Or how do I choose to start writing a book or start a podcast or start another business on the side so that I can get to a point where I don't need to go to this job? We get choice every single day. We've got to stop saying I have to do something, because you don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to the doctor. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to wash your clothes. You don't have to have a shower. You don't have to do the chores. You do them because you choose to do them, because you want to live with order in your life and you want to live with abundance or whatever it might be. So just change your language here. We get choice with everything now. If we get to choose everything, then we can change in a heartbeat. And that's exciting.
It is. And you brought up something that I love to think about, because there was a time in my life where, everything's imploding, exploding, doing whatever it does. And that was a fair amount of my, my young life, was that even after I got out of, drug and alcohol treatment, all that sort of thing. But my attitude back then was, man, what is going to happen next? And that's a terrible way to live. And
yeah. Well, you've given your future to some other
just giving it
outside of
away.
your control. It's like, I'll just see what comes into my life and I'll deal with it as it comes. Well, that's no way to live.
Right. And so for a long time now, it's been like, man, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next, because this life thing is so cool. And I love waking up in the morning every day. And I don't necessarily have that thought, but I love to get out of bed. I love to do what I do. I love to make the bed. I love to read. I love to meditate. I love to breathe. I love to do all the things that I do, eating right, exercise, and living my life in a way that shows that I want to live my life. And it takes a while to get to that point, but man, when you start doing that, it's crazy good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I enjoy that. So we were talking a little bit about some of the little things, some of the habits, but is there a for a small habit that maybe you implemented in your life that made a big difference for your everyday?
Well, there's lots of small habits, mate. That's all my life is small habits. That's all it is. I don't do anything big. I just do lots of little things and I keep doing them. Even being an author today, and I've written 8 books and number 9's on the way this year, and people say to me, wow, that's impressive. And I try to convince them it's not impressive at all. It's just a daily habit. I write 10 to 15 minutes a day. That's it. There's nothing impressive about writing for 10 minutes a day. Trust me. The key is I do it every day. It's just part of who I am. I exercise, like you were saying, mate. I get up and every morning my alarm goes off at 4:45 a.m. And I can tell you probably 0 out of 100 times I feel like getting up. But I do it anyway. Why? Because it's a habit. It's unconscious. It's no longer something I have to think about, negotiate, debate about. It's just part of who I am now. I just get out of bed and I exercise. I do it every day. Same with eating, same with listening, same with reading, same with communicating and building business development and all sorts of stuff. I mean, my life is simply habits, and I know if I want something else in my life, it's going to create another habit. That's all. That's all it is. But it starts with but. Let me give you the but here. The habit is dependent on the identity, because if your identity doesn't support the habit, you won't last. There's a I don't know. I've got this book here. And this was a book. It's a book called The Power to Change by Craig Groeschel. And in it, the statement that just took a hold was, you do what you do because of what you think of you. You do what you do, so the things you do, the actions you take, the habits you create are dependent on what you think about yourself. So if I'm going to get fit and healthy and I'm going to get in shape and this is it, and I start getting up every day, but my belief is you don't stick to anything, you're a procrastinator, you've got no willpower, you've tried before, you're probably not going to fire, you're not going to succeed, it's not going to work for you. That's what's going to win out. That identity is going to win. So yes, you can go to all the effort to try and create a habit, but if you haven't built the identity that will support that habit, if you haven't built the self-belief that will drive the action, it's not going to last. So the greatest habit of all, Darryl, is that habit of self-talk, the habit of identity. Every day, prayer every day, affirmation every day, reminding myself that I am worthy, that I am good enough, that I am an action taker, that I'm a habit creator, that I am a difference maker. Every single day, that's the work. That's the greatest work there is, because writing a book's not hard. Getting in shape's not hard. Building a business really isn't that hard. The hard work is building the identity that will support what you're trying to do to get the outcome you want.
Absolutely. And I spend my time, because I have the type of a personality. I can take things to the extreme. That's just, and it's part of me, and it's part of how I'm built, and I can have a mind that runs rampant, and it's been a long time, but the things that I've developed and the measures that I take every single day, and it is little stuff. I mean, it's probably, out of a 24-hour day, I probably spend an hour and a half or so with my disciplines, my habits. And but they quiet my mind, they quiet my heart, they allow me gratitude. I practice gratitude every day, and those are the difference makers. Those are the things. and you talk about, sort of mindset kind of stuff, but if I'm grateful, then to me the world just opens up, because
Totally.
there's something in gratitude that just changes life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're far too fixated on the behaviors that we need to take and far less focused on the things that build us from the ground up. And gratitude is one of them. Appreciation for the world, the things we've got. I really stopping to think about the strengths, the gifts that I have, because I tend to keep going. My mind keeps going to what I'm not good at, what I can't do, what I haven't done, what I should be doing, rather than, okay, what have I done? What am I doing? What am I good at? What's my strength? What's my gift? What are those character traits that I own, that I have? And I know I'm persistent. I know I'm compassionate. I know I'm determined. I know I'm faithful. I know I've got a capacity. I know that stuff. It's just when I let the noise distract me from that, that's the problem. So that's where we've all got to really spend some deliberate time every day. It doesn't need to be a lot of time. It's only a few minutes a day or a couple of times a day, just refocusing on who I am, because I am worthy. And I mean, this was a big problem for me because I've never felt worthy. And it was really, for me, the biggest shift was when I stepped into my faith and I started to think about the fact that, if I'm a child of God and He created me, He loves me, and I'm worthy. I'm worthy because I'm here, not because of anything I do. He doesn't care what I do or don't do. He loves me anyway. Like a dad, right? Like a dad loves their kid, irrespective. Yeah. Even when their kid's doing dumb stuff, and trust me, I did a lot of dumb stuff. My parents kept loving me. They loved me anyway. They loved me for who I was, not for what I did, or how I looked, or how much money I had, or how successful I was in business, or whether I had a six-pack in buns of steel. They loved, or whether I made it as a professional athlete. They loved me anyway. Why is it that we put so many conditions on our self-love when the people that know us love us unconditionally? The God that created us loves us unconditionally. And I think when we can get to that point where I love me because I'm here, because I exist, then we can grow from there. Like everything we achieve comes from that foundation of self-love rather than trying to achieve self-love. Because when you try to achieve it through accumulation and achievement, you'll never get there. I've chased that a lot of my life and never ever got it. But when you build the self-love, watch the achievement happen then, and you do it from that base, not to achieve ground zero, but from ground zero, then the world is your oyster, and then things happen, things change, lives change, you change, great things come into your life.
It's amazing. Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. And one of the things that is foundational, we were kind of talking about foundational things, and one of my foundational things is being teachable and understanding that there's this, I'm not the one who makes the planets move. I'm not the one who makes the grass grow. I'm not the one who makes my ears hear or my hair grow or whatever. There's something else significantly larger than me that is handling all of that stuff. Even breathing. I don't have to think about breathing. I don't have to think about my heart.
Isn't that good? We don't have to think about breathing. Imagine if we had to focus every day on every moment on taking a breath. It'd be a very stressful day.
Yeah, when you're sleeping, you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean there's so much that's just handled, right, for us. And that's the coolest thing ever. And I have to understand that look, there's a lot out there that I just don't know, nor do I need to know. I just need to plug in and not. The worst thing I can do is stop my own progress. And it's so easy to do that. But plugging into that channel, plugging into the right channel is really not that difficult. It's about listening. It's about being humble. It's about being grateful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to complicate so much. And you talked about writing. and hey, what I do isn't difficult. I write for 15 minutes a day. It's so easy to complicate it and think, oh man, I've got so much to do today. I got to write for 3 hours. I got to get 30 pages done. Like you said, you don't have to do anything. We can choose to do things. And I think
we choose.
Yeah, we can take I'm a big fan of taking my power back and not giving it away to all of these things that I can give it away to, and splintering myself. I can bring it all back in here, and inside here. And speaking of God, that's, I believe God is everywhere, but man, if I take my power back, it's right here, and it's very powerful.
Well, it's a noisy world we live in, and right now the noise is loud. The noise is everywhere. The social media crap, the wars that are happening in Australia right now, petrol prices are going through the roof, and people are now hoarding petrol. People are going out with little cans and filling it up, and now petrol stations are running out of petrol, and there's all this noise and fear, and if we buy into it, we're going to be distracted from the most important things in our life. And you're right, life is simple. Like everything I do to get the outcome I want is simple. I do the writing, I move my body, I put the right foods in, I make the calls, I encourage and lift people, I help people, I grow people. It's not hard to do. It's just choice. So you just got to keep remembering everything's a choice. Nothing's a have to. I don't have to do anything. I choose to. You can choose to turn off the TV. You can choose to not watch the news. You can choose to not read newspapers. You can choose not to listen to radio. You can choose to read books that will uplift and empower you. You can choose to listen to amazing podcasts like this one. You get to choose who you associate with. You choose. All these are choices. I have to go to work. Yeah, I have to deal with this toxic person. No, you don't have to. You can avoid them. There's choice. Everything's choice. And when you understand you get to choose, then you can simplify and you can focus on those simple actions, those simple behaviors that over time repeated will create a very predictable outcome. They'll create abundance. My life now is abundant in so many areas, not because I'm clever, not because I'm special, not because I know more. In fact, I probably know less. I mentor authors now, and I say to most of them, you are far more qualified to be an author than I ever was or ever will be. The only difference potentially between you and me is I do it every single day. I don't miss a day. And I believe in myself now. I've done the work to have self-belief. And life's simple. It truly is simple.
I love it, Andrew. I really do. And it's so great to hear that. And it's so great to get back to that simplicity, because it's not a complex program. And I like to say life is a simple game for complicated human beings. And I believe that to be true.
Well, it's humans that complicate things. We love to complicate things. Like life is simple. I mean, right. Look at animals. My gosh, have a look at a dog, for goodness sake. A dog, I love dogs. I just love them. Part of my goals every week, I have a goal to get some dog love. I've got a certain number. I've got a goal to get a certain number of dogs when I go out in the train in the morning, and I've got my little doggy friends, and they just want to be loved. Like, they just got such a simple outlook on life. Is I want to go for a walk. I want to get a pat. I need to eat food. I'm going to be happy every time I see someone. I'm going to wag my tail and give them a lick. And it's amazing how many people, when their dog, they walk past with their dog, and the dog jumps up on me and licks, and they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'll say, "Don't be sorry. This is absolute joy to me." To have this beautiful creature show me that love. Why can't I do that more often with other people? And I'm not saying I'm going to jump on them and lick them, but why can't I be enthusiastic about seeing people? Why can't I? That, again, this is simple stuff. This is choice. We often say, well, that person made me angry. No, they never made you angry. You chose anger. Understand, you are in control of your thoughts, which means you are totally in control of your emotions. What you focus on will lead to an emotion. So if you're feeling an emotion, stop blaming someone else and say, well, it's not my fault. Such and such made me angry or frustrated or fearful. You chose anger based on your perception of what was said or what was done. You chose that, which means if you chose anger, you can choose gratitude. You can choose empathy. You can choose joy. You can choose. I think the theme sounds like the theme of this podcast is choice. We all have choice, make better choices, and better things will happen in your life.
Great stuff, Andrew. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your joy and your wonderful way that you approach life. It
Thanks,
really,
Dale.
yeah, it's very, very cool. And I know a lot of people, get so much out of what you offer. So how do we find you out there? How do we find your books? How do we find your coaching and speaking?
Well, the simplest thing is go to my website, Andrew Jobling, jobling.au on the end. So andrewjobling.com.au. And
Great.
my podcast, I have you, Daryl. You were one of my fabulous guests.
I'm an alumni.
Back episode 298 of the Wellness Puzzle podcast, When I Stopped Fighting, is with Daryl Dittmer. So encourage people to go and listen to that as well, because that was an awesome podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was fun. We had a great conversation and another great one today. And I very much appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you. And we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Thank you for joining us on the Show Up podcast. To learn more about me, my coaching, or my books, please feel free to visit my website, daryldittmer.com. DarylDittmer.com. Thank you.